Thank you. So at this point in the afternoon, we've heard so many amazing concepts this morning. This presentation that we're going to share with you is really a status report of where we're up to in an implementation process happening at Genentech right now. We've been through a research effort and we're going into a prototyping effort. And so we wanted to share with you where we're up to right here and now. In a few months, we'll have new learnings to share. But this is really an effort to embody many of the concepts that have been shared with us this morning in a real-life example. So I'll hand it to Anne to get started.
Thank you. It's lovely to see all of you. It's lovely to be back with colleagues whom I've known for a long time. And I particularly want to thank Philip Ross for bringing this community of practice together in such a meaningful way, because we really are sort of a niche. We're the ones who've been trying to integrate this stuff for years. So I'm happy to say everyone else is, we're all starting to say the same thing. I'm guessing I can push this thing to advance slides. We'll find out. Yeah, so I had the benefit of working at Sun Microsystems forever and learned that the network was the computer and the cloud existed before the cloud even became the cloud. And with that wonderful background, I've been given an opportunity to reinvent at Genentech, which is a fabulous company. And I'm very, very happy to be there. And I'm very, very pleased to say that I'm not just here as a real estate person. I have human resources professionals here. I have our IT people here. And it is so refreshing to be with a company that really cares about its people and cares about their patients as well. So as you probably know, I've only been there for 6 months, so the people here are more capable of talking about the products than I, and yet I'm very proud to be there. We are among the leading biotech companies. In fact, we were the first, and South San Francisco is our home, an interesting little place down a little bit south of here and a little bit north of where I live, and I would welcome you to come visit us sometime. We're in the process of reinventing it. The campus is really sort of an urban environment. It's definitely grew organically. The company is over 30 years old, and the reason for being there was very, very powerful when the first two founders, a scientist and a venture capitalist, decided they wanted to be unassuming. And they found a very unassuming and very, very, very kind place to be. South San Francisco is very old. It's an industrial city. In fact, you see South San Francisco, the industrial city, and it's got its own charm. So I, who have been in Silicon Valley pretty much my whole career, am experiencing something very new here, which is a gentler, kinder place and actually a nicer place to be. Small for me, 60 buildings, 5 million square feet, 10,000 employees, all of whom are there. So again, something new for me, being in the network, being the computer where everybody was remote. Researchers are doing research there. We've got product development people who are doing clinical trials there, although increasingly global, and we actually manufacture on campus. And with all the advent of offshoring, up until 6 months ago, we had learned that manufacturing was probably going to not be on the campus much longer. Well, it turns out that's not true, and we have a new invigorated manufacturing effort going on, which should be very interesting. So we've got very mixed use here, right? We're not talking high tech. We're not talking half of the offices that we talked about today. We're talking about people who are actually in labs. We're talking about people who are on manufacturing floors. And then we also have people like me, the dweebs, who provide the services for the people who sit and work there, and also commercial marketing and sales, very office-based people. So the experiment that Antonia and I will talk to you about really have a lot to do with part of the reason I'm there, which was the company would like to think about forces that are changing even South San Francisco. And obviously Roche is something new. Roche bought Genentech 4 years ago. They've left it alone very wisely because Genentech is good at what they do, and they do a very fine job of doing it in South San Francisco. However, we do have Swiss parents. I was going to try an accent, but then I thought I couldn't compete with some of the, and I have Antonia, so I don't have to. But we have Swiss parents now. And I think that makes a difference, but you know, they're really treating us very, very, very graciously. They don't want to mess with a good thing. However, technology is a big factor, and we have fabulous technology at Genentech. They went thin client before anyone else even thought of doing it. I at Sun was trying to promote that. Genentech said, we're doing it. And Roche has accepted the fact that it's a thin client company. So I mean, very, very progressive. And we really are finding, that number, 60% of the people are out. I mean, come on, that's been true for years now. So that's true at Genentech too. So rather than continuing to put money in real estate that isn't being used, we're having a look at what we might do to make our researchers more competitive, our manufacturing folks more competitive, product development. And oh, by the way, we're starting with some office-based folks because we're building a 7-story office building in the center of the campus. My team is the workplace effectiveness team, and quite a few of us are here. Thank you for coming. Antonia is here representing DTZ. My former colleague, Glenn and David Harris know very well. Eric Rickert and I worked together for years at Sun. He has joined a firm called Optimase, and that company is a Finnish company that's actually working in new ways of working, sort of an integrated facilities management system. They're trying to automate and productize some of the IP that we've generated over the last few years. But I also want to shout out to Perkins and Will, a lot of other folks who are here. We're working in a very, very progressive, seamless way to try to build the office of the future. I'll do this quickly because I know that it's late. I'm standing between us and cocktails. I could use one right now. If anyone's got one, slip it to me. Because this is the academic slide that I always get to do, right? Because I'm the academic one. The message I want to leave with you is that research really matters. And we haven't talked about research much anymore. My old teachers, Frank Duffy and Mike Brill, are here somewhere in my head, reminding me how very important it is to think about what you do before you do it. And part of the methodology we've brought to Genentech actually involves a process. And what I'm going to ask you to remember is that work practices really matter. And designing around and for the work practices is really what we're trying to do. And to try to unearth what those work practices are, yeah, you can just sit somewhere and watch them for 20 minutes, but you can also ask them, because people will tell you how they need to work. People will tell you how they do their best work. It's in their best interest to do their best work because that's how they're evaluated. So a big part of what we've done, and we continue to roll out at Genentech, is the first 3, what you see in blue. We interview our executives to have them tell us what is the business of the business. What are the outcomes that they're really measuring us against? Is it cycle time? Is it money? What is it? And they know, and they'll tell you. And then we do these work practice workshops where we bring people in who are the workers and ask them about their work practices, their behaviors. What do they do day in and day out when they're working really well, when they're getting their work done? What does that look like? And they will tell us. And interestingly enough, when you then ask them to come to a workshop that would actually take the kit of parts that we have, again, the patterns that have emerged over the years that we're all relatively familiar with, kind of result into a kit of parts of certain technology, certain physical work environments, and oh, by the way, what are the social behaviors, the practices that need to be introduced to make these environments a healthy, integrated environment. People will come to these workshops. They really will. They'll come and they'll co-develop the space with you. And that is fabulous. And when you've got that, there's no need for change management because you're not changing anything. You're co-developing a work environment that's totally suited to the type of work that people do. And we're getting some really interesting feedback. We'll get to that. I think we have time for a slide at the end where we'll go through some of our early learnings. The rest you're probably familiar with, space utilization, observation, the simple stuff, right? The walkthroughs, that's where you get the 60% out. I mean, we know that, we've known that for a while. But it's nice to put it in writing, it's nice to show people. And then also we do surveys, asking people about the nature of their collaboration. When they're not in, we know they're working because we're getting work done. Where are you and what are you doing and what's the nature of your technology? And then we're planning to do prototypes. Antonia will talk about the 3 that we have on the docket. I was not going to use the word prototype again. I have not heard it so many times as I have today. It's actually very interesting. This design school, the D-school thinking, has really inundated our world. But with pre and post surveys, we think we'll learn a lot about the nature of the prototypes. We're going to, again, measure about the work practices. It's not about do you like the space. It's about are you getting the things done that you told us you needed to get done. What we learned when we did our interviews with the executives is probably something that if you interviewed your executives, you would be hearing from them. This is almost mom and pop and apple pie, but it's really important. For us, our executives told us, and this was not so unusual that it was different for sales than it was for G&A, that was different for research. Essentially, executives want their people to understand their customers, right? And for each business unit, it might be a different customer. It might be a patient, it might be a partner, it might be an internal customer. Customers matter. Internal and external expertises were becoming increasingly outsourced. Everybody is. We're leveraging our partners. They're all here. We want to work with them closely. It's important. Understanding cross-organization and how cross-organization work happens is increasingly important. Innovative processes, everyone's talking about that. Accomplishing more with less, right? That's the old cost thing. When I was at Sun, that's all we could talk about. Genentech's got margins that are really quite phenomenal, and even they are very, very aware that if you can do more with the resources you have now, you can only do even more for your patients. And then, this is something I never heard at Sun. No offense to Sun, it doesn't exist anymore. Ha! Employee engagement and well-being is something I'm very, very happy with at Genentech. The company really does care about its employees. Now, given those, what do the employees say they need to do to be successful? Well, oddly enough, they talked a lot about leveraging technology, which, hey, since that's such a big topic, it's a good thing they said that. Leveraging technology, why? Not just for the sake of leveraging technology, right? You don't just give them technology and say, knock yourselves out. They themselves told us that they want to interact more informally and less formally. Not so many formal meetings, not so many structured meetings, but rather the got-a-minute, quick hallway conversation, getting an answer to something you want to get an answer to, and oh, by the way, using technology to do it. Also, accomplishing more individual work. This is the business about needing to collaborate, needing to get work done with colleagues, but man, oh man, when the meeting's over, I'd really like to synthesize what I just heard. It's that in between the meetings, right? It's that break time in between where you get to synthesize what you just learned. Really an important thing that people told us about. And working effectively across time and distance. Yes, we're global. Yes, Roche is the partner, the parent actually, the wonderful parent that sits in Switzerland. But even on that campus, that wonderful campus in South San Francisco, you can't really walk from building to building. It's hilly, it's urban, it's mixed use, there's other tenants who live on that site, there's other things that are going on that site. So for us to get from one building to another, we have to get on a bus and it takes us like 15 minutes and people are saying, I don't have the time for that. So let's start leveraging technology to do that. And then, oh, by the way, this silo thing, pretty common. I mean, I remember it in every job I've ever been in, and here it's become a very important thing for Genentech. They want to interact across groups to break down silos. They want to use technology to do that, and it is eminently doable. So this is what we are building our prototypes around. It's these practices. This will be the pre-survey. We'll ask people how well they're able to do this now, and then we'll build our little work environment that people will help us co-develop, and then we'll go back and ask them the exact same questions. Are you able to do this better? We'll talk about the enablers, which is our little kit of parts. People talked about a lot of kit of parts. Ours is about as integrated as you can get, because we know that it's a system of interventions. You don't just put in a place that requires technology without adding the technology. You don't give someone technology without teaching them how to use it. And you can't really have people, if you build it, they'll come. That's never been my experience. It's really build a space around the way they're talking about wanting to work. Choices, we mentioned that earlier, choices are so important for people, especially now when they have on the margin, they can make choices about where to work. And if the place is not energized and exciting, people won't come in. And if they don't come in, then you don't have the benefit of that energy of being with other people, which we talked about. So this is our kit of parts, and our team is putting them together in different ways, shapes, and forms to suit the different groups that we're working with. And the different groups at the moment are a G&A group, another G&A group that's IT, and a product development group. Now, are you going to get into all of these lovely folks?
I am.
Okay.
Thank you, Anne. So what is being prototyped? We've been through an extensive research process and learnt an awful lot about these folks, and so now we're in the process of moving forward and creating environments for them to be successful. So the three areas that are part of the work environment by definition here at Genentech are these: team agreements and tools. That is all of the agreements, whether they be explicit or informal, that we have with our team members to make us effective at work. An agreement might be, I'll be here between this hour in the morning and this hour in the afternoon, or I will always answer correspondence between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. You know, these kinds of things are agreements. And these are elements that we're prototyping, some new agreements with folks at Genentech. We're also prototyping technology. There's an amazing technology toolkit available at Genentech today, and so we are ensuring that the folks involved in these prototypes will have access to these technologies and will be well trained in their capabilities. And then thirdly, the third component of a work environment, along with the team agreements and the technological tools available to people, is certainly the space that they have to work from, should they choose to be there. And that has two components. It has an on-site component and then also an off-site component, where people will begin to be permitted through their team agreement to work from home, which is a little different to the way things are happening today. So Anne mentioned that there were three groups being prototyped. We've illustrated them in the horizontal rows here. So there are three acronyms there: SS, PI, and PD, just for different names of different business units. And each one has a slightly different complexion. But what we're doing around each of the three areas that we're prototyping is using a consistent approach around the elements that we're testing. So around team agreements and tools, we're allowing each one of these prototype groups to make their own agreements. So those agreements for one team may differ to the agreements made in another team. Some may be very consistent, some may be radically different. So each team is having an opportunity to make its own agreements. In relation to technology, there is one consistent and streamlined set of technology tools that will be deployed, and in many cases has already been fully deployed to folks, but will be adopted by them, and they will be trained and coached in using these tools more effectively as part of this prototype. Then in relation to place, there is the same menu of spaces available for each one of the prototype user groups, but they'll make their own selection of the quantities of those spaces within each group. And in fact, that selection is very heavily informed by the learnings that we've derived out of the research process. So the research will help us suggest which spaces will be most effective for each one of the prototype user groups. So together we are testing a collection of variables. So, for example, let's just take a hypothetical example here. In relation to team agreements, a group may be having, in fact, all of the groups at Genentech today have informal team agreements. These things are not documented and are not necessarily explicitly discussed or written down. So there's an ad hoc understanding of the way that teams will behave and be effective at their work. Going forward, once we get through these prototypes and onwards, there will be an explicit understanding of what it is that is required to glue the team members together to have them be effective at work. In relation to technology, today these technologies are available to people, and some people use some of them very effectively, but not everybody, all of them. So in future, we're looking at really a technology immersion, everybody being trained and coached going forward in how to make the best use of these tools to work as a team together. And then in relation to spaces and places, today there's a very standard space allocation at Genentech. Nearly every corner of every building looks something like this drawing. In future, we're looking at a network of places with combinations of spaces similar to some of the illustrations and imagery that we've seen today. So this is a before and after shot. And what sort of period of time are we talking about here? 2 months. 2 months from today, we could have these prototypes all complete and ready to talk about what's happened in relation to the implementation, and then a little further down the line, some testing of them. So change is imminent. So what's being measured here, and Anne mentioned this in her commentary, in relation to the prototypes, there's all of the standard things that we can measure around places and spaces. We can measure how many people, we can measure how often they're there, we can measure what sort of technologies they're making the most of, we can measure whether they're actually using the agreements that they set in place. So those things will certainly be managed. But in addition, we'll be managing these work practices, measuring these work practices. We will be asking people, are they interacting more informally now and less formally? Are they accomplishing more individual work or spending more time at individual work? Is it effective, their work across time and distance? And are they actually feeling like they're beginning to break down the silos between these groups? So we can ask people very explicitly about their work practices, and we will be. And we also will be looking at the business results and working with senior leadership to determine whether they believe that they're meeting their desired business outcomes. So we will be tracking each one of these things. Just as we wrap up about prototypes, there's a whole lot of things that prototypes are. The word has been used extensively today. Choice, integration between technology and the agreements and soft elements between people along with the physical environment. It's certainly about focused work practices, so that we're actually paying attention to the particular practices we're aiming on at helping people improve at. We talked about measurements and that it's outcome-based. The work practices have been defined in order to achieve those outcomes that were explicitly mentioned by the leaders in their interviews. And then it's not about all of these things. It's not a rule or a mandate. It's not just about creating a new place and they will come. It's not about who gets an enclosed or open space or standards or have we, stamped out the right allocation. It's not subjective. It's quite objective, and it's certainly not just about cost savings. So, the prototype is really explicit around what it is that we're trying to achieve. And so, Anne, if you'd like to come back here and join me for the last couple of minutes and talk about some of the things that we've really picked up over the last few months while we've been focusing on this research and the development of prototypes. So perhaps you'd like to kick us off.
And I think we could take questions at the same time. What do you
Sure,
think?
sure.
How are we doing on time? I can't see the time.
1 minute.
No questions. Forget the questions.
We'll hang around for questions.
My experience, and especially being at Genentech, is that it's quite refreshing because the scientists are genuinely interested in science, and something that's science-driven and data-driven is inherently interesting to knowledge workers. And no matter what the folks do at Genentech, they're all knowledge workers. And whether they're technicians or whether they're lab people or whether they're office people, they're very interested in the science-driven approach. So that's been a very, very pleasant surprise for me.
Absolutely. And then some of these themes were brought up this morning. Trust and engagement is built on transparency and involvement, and we certainly have been both transparent and as inclusive as we can be, and we've seen amazing level of trust from executives.
No, it's really true. This next one is actually one that Maren put up for us, right? She says it's not about the prototyping, it's about the prototyping.
Back up. Take two.
You take two. No, it's about the experience. It's just the end result is not nearly as important as the process, and I think that's really, I'm finding that to be very true.
There's a really high level of interest in trying new things at Genentech. It's absolutely inspiring.
And again, as evidenced by the folks who've come along to one of these conferences, which actually is a big deal. I've got cross-functional people, and they're working together seamlessly and appreciating each other's contributions, and something I really value that I'm experiencing at Genentech in a way I never had before.
And finally, research and choice are really highly valued there. And so being able to conduct the research and give people choices is working really successfully for us. And we've got a great momentum for change, so we look forward to telling the next story next time.
Yeah, but earlier in the day, okay? Philip, where are you? This end of the day stuff.
Noted.
Yes. Thank you.
Please join me in a round of applause.